Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I'm Matthew Brockmeyer,
And I'm Krista Carmen.
and this is
Murder Coaster.
step right up, ladies and gentlemen. Hear a tale of demonic possession, murder, exorcisms, a fight to the end with the devil himself, with our old friends, Ed and Lorraine Warren, as we bring you the real story behind the Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. We uncover the truth, the lies, the scams, hustles, and what really brought on the tragic death of Allan Bono. Buckle up, for today we are going to shout at the devil!
Let's begin. Prologue. The Devilish Waterbed. It was the waterbed that first caught the attention of the little boy. He'd never seen anything like it before, wanted badly to leap onto it, imagined rolling in the undulating waves, but his older sister Debbie had forbidden him to touch it, so he sat perplexed, staring at the foreboding bed, transfixed. And that's when the devil appeared.
It was July 2nd, 1980. And July 2nd is a special day here at Murder Coaster, by the way, for it is both Krista and my birthday.
Woo!
Yes. We're birthday twins.
Fabulous.
Anyway, it was July 2nd, 1980, that the terror began. Little David Gratzel, just 11 years old, was helping his sister Debbie and her boyfriend Arnie move into their new house when he discovered the waterbed in an upstairs bedroom.
The waterbed had been left by the previous occupants, who were coming back to retrieve it, and Debbie was afraid little David might damage or even puncture the bed if he played on it. It was a hot day, the middle of a summer heat wave, but it was mysteriously cold in the room as David stood transfixed, a broom in his hand, staring at the ominous waterbed, which slowly pulsated and undulated.
And then 2 invisible hands seized the boy, throwing him atop the forbidden waterbed. Landing sprawled on the water-filled mattress, the sudden waves from the impact tossing him up and down, he peered into the shadows of the room to see an elderly man grinning at him fiendishly. Only the man was transparent. David could see right through him. The old man had a white mustache, a large and gnarled mole by his eye, and wore a dirty red plaid shirt with torn and ragged sleeves, old ripped blue jeans, and there was malice in his eyes.
The terrifying specter slowly lifted an arm, pointing a skeletal finger at him, and from a mouth of rotting teeth muttered a single word.
Beware.
This old man would follow David back to his house, taunting and teasing, menacing his entire family, though David was the only one who could actually see him. The nefarious phantom's cruel antics led him to become known as the Beast, and eventually the old man would reveal himself to be none other than the devil himself. Satan, the great red dragon, Lucifer, the fallen lightbringer, once the highest of the angels, the anointed cherub, the most beautiful of all God's creations, but then cast from heaven for his pride, banished to the fires of hell, and now the literal personification of evil itself. And the devil wasn't shy about who he was, appearing in his trademark red skin with black horns, a pointy black goatee, long tail, and even cloven hooves for feet.
And the devil The devil liked to lounge in bed. Yes, the devil loved that waterbed. But soon the devil moved to an old mattress, as the devil, and I quote, needs a place to relax.
Wait, real quick aside, who quote from who?
From the book The Devil in Connecticut.
Ah, okay. I didn't know if the devil himself came down and someone like heard him saying this.
Well, it is a direct quote from the devil from the book.
Oh,
So, yes, the
okay.
devil, that is what the devil said. The devil said, the devil needs a place to relax.
Don't we all? The devil would come to David's house, infecting it with demonic energy, manifested in poltergeist-like phenomenon, and bring his minions up from hell as well, eventually consuming David with a full-on possession.
Was it real? Had the devil really risen from the depths of hell to lounge on waterbeds and infest a little boy? Or was it the overactive imagination of a child? Either way, a murder would soon follow. A murder which would see the first time a defense of innocent by reason of demonic possession was presented in an American courtroom. Yes, you heard that right. A defense of innocence by reason of demonic possession in a 1980s American courtroom for a murder case.
But before we get there, we need to take a look at the family who would literally go to battle with Satan himself, the Gratzels.
Chapter 1, The Gratzels.
The Gratzels were a large working-class family living in the rural suburbs of Brookfield, Connecticut, in a ranch house they'd extended to fit their ever-growing family on an acre of land. The father and patriarch of the family, Carl, was a big, burly man with a long beard, who was a specialty mechanic on heavy-duty machinery and in charge of machine maintenance. His petite wife, Judy, was a dedicated homemaker.
They had 4 children and 1 grandchild. The family members can get a little confusing, especially as in the Netflix documentary The Devil on Trial. David says he was the middle child of 5 siblings. He's not. He's the youngest of 4 children, but was including his young nephew, Debbie's son Jason, in the mix. Like we said, it can be a little confusing, but we'll break it all down for you, starting with David.
David Gratzel was 11 years old when he discovered the devil loved waterbeds. He was the youngest of the Gratzel children, a big-boned kid who's described as a roly-poly teddy bear. If you want to envision him, think of Pugsley from the Addams Family. And he even wore striped shirts, making him look pretty much just like Pugsley. He'd been the baby of the family, a position that had recently been usurped when his nephew Jason moved into the household.
Next is Allan, a nerdy 13-year-old who is very close with his little brother David. Both these kids are kind of lost in space, just very imaginative, into their games and comic books, and they're a little team, Allan and David.
Then there's Carl Jr., 15 years old. Carl Jr. takes after his namesake father. He loves working on engines, is all about dirt bikes and snowmobiles. Also, like his dad, he's big, a tough guy. He lifts weights. He loves his father and spends a lot of time with him working on motors. They have 4 snowmobiles, a mess of dirt bikes and trucks. They're a team. They're also very practical, not ones to believe in superstition.
Carl Jr. is often displayed as kind of an asshole, especially in the book The Devil in Connecticut. And truth was, he was a tough 70s teenager, probably with a chip on his shoulder. And apparently he did make fun of his little brothers for being nerds at times. But once you start studying this family and their history and the events that are to unfold, including a murder, you get the sense that he's actually a very smart and cool guy. I actually like him, Carl Jr., the best out of everybody in this crazy family.
Then there's Debbie, the oldest, and the oldest by a lot. She's 26, with a 12-year gap between her and Carl Jr.
I don't know what the story is with that. Wouldn't you think a 12-year gap in kids is kind of odd? And then they just spit 3 out real quick in a row. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I don't know, man. Weird.
It could be anything. It could be anything, but who knows? So Debbie, okay. So Debbie had gotten married when she was just a teenager and now had a 7 year old son named Jason. He barely gets mentioned in any of the research I did. As a matter of fact, I don't think he's mentioned once in the Netflix documentary. So we have no idea what his deal is or what's up with the father or why the marriage didn't work. But Debbie had been living with a close friend of hers named Mary Johnson, a chronically ill, divorced woman with 4 children of her own. So while living there, Debbie hooked up with Mary's son, who is 18, named Arnie. Yes, she's 26 with a 7 year old son, and she hooked up with the teenage son of the woman she was living with. Also, it's implied they'd been together for a while, so I'm going to assume Arnie was 17 or 16 and she was around 25 when they first hooked up, probably around the time he quit high school. It's said in the book that Arnie quit high school in the 10th grade out of a quote, sense of compassion and responsibility so he could help his struggling family. I don't know. I know later newspaper articles describe him as a tough street kid.
So while Arnie more or less takes a back seat during all the initial possession craziness that's about to go down, remember him, because it's actually him that ends up being the murderer in the end.
Right. Again, Arnie is the teenage son of Mary and the boyfriend of Debbie, who had been living with Mary. Trying to make this all clear. It's complicated.
Now, like any good haunted house story, usually you hear about the Gratzels being a wholesome American family who worked hard, went to church, were honest, and dedicated themselves to their family and God. But Carl Jr. says differently. He says, quote,
We were far from the happy, normal American family.
one of those issues that's brought up occasionally but never really fully explored is that Carl Sr. had started working 2 jobs to house and feed the growing horde. Soon, an even bigger horde when Debbie eventually moves in with her son and her 18-year-old boyfriend.
Everyone says the dynamic was different when Carl Sr. was in the house, and I can imagine so. He's not only a very large man who works on motors all day, it's his house, and he paid for it with his blood, sweat, and tears. And now that he's working 2 jobs, he's basically not there. He's either working or sleeping. So there was a power vacuum going on.
This is also something we saw with the Bathsheba Conjuring House case. The father was completely absent. In that case, it turned out he was having an affair. Carl Sr. was not having an affair. He was just working his ass off to keep the family going.
Debbie was very close with her mother, Judy. They would sit around smoking cigarettes and talk about all kinds of things, gossiping and getting each other going. And this was the dawn of the satanic panic, the golden age, when it was all bubbling up. 6 years earlier, The Exorcist had come out, and The Omen just 3 years after that. Both huge hits, just prime satanic panic beginning. The Amityville horror case had broke. The movie had been released less than a year before all this happened. And I actually remember my mom having a copy of the Amityville horror laying around as a kid. I think it was a mandatory reading for every suburban mom while sipping a gin and tonic on a hot day while the kids played in the sprinkler.
Sounds awesome. You
Right?
often hear Judy described as very religious and active in the church, but it appears this isn't true at all. Evidently, she didn't get active in the church until all this devil business started up. They didn't even go to church. Carl Sr. wasn't baptized and refused to do so when they asked him. As Carl Jr. would later say about his mother,
She didn't go to church or any of that stuff until this started happening with David.
Carl Jr. also describes her as very quick to anger and with her own agenda, and if it didn't get met, she'd go berserk.
There's home movie footage of her looking kind of tough in a tank top, a cigarette hanging out of her mouth, smacking the kids with an open palm. It's an interesting image to contrast if you watch her appearances on talk shows, where she's always looking very prim and proper.
But it's Debbie and Judy who take things to a whole new level in the story to come. They were also the only adults in the house at the time. Everyone else were children or teenagers, including 26-year-old Debbie's live-in lover, who would go on to commit murder.
Chapter 2. The first stage of diabolical possession. Okay, let's get on with the story. So, what happened was, in the summer of 1980, Debbie and Mary and all their combined children, including Debbie's boyfriend Arnie, were looking for a house to rent together. If you add all of them up with the kids, it's 7 people.
Debbie found a house set in the woods on a long country road. There's a main house for Mary and the kids, and a back apartment for Debbie, Arnie, and Debbie's 7-year-old son, Jason. The owner telling her,
"This is your house. I want you to have it."
which she says was spooky from the start.
I don't know. Do you find that spooky?
No.
Yeah, it seems like they're just being nice, right?
It's like total like hindsight. Let's fit the hindsight to match what happened in the future.
I want you to have this house. God.
Yeah, I mean, no biggie. So Debbie goes to move in and enlists her little dreamy roly-poly brother David to come help. It's going to be a family project. But there were issues right away. The previous tenant had left a lot of their belongings, including the forlorn waterbed of Satan, and the back apartment Debbie was supposed to live in was still occupied, the renter saying they needed another month to get out. Added to all this frustration, little David is acting weird as hell and says a ghost man threw him on the waterbed he was told not to play on.
You know, it really sounds like he just wanted to get on that damn waterbed. It was probably driving him crazy. And then he invented a ghost man to give himself an excuse to roll on it. He'd probably been bombarded with television ads for the Amityville Horror, which had recently come out. I want to cover that case too one day. It's fascinating. It includes a very gruesome family murder.
Yes, yes. But Debbie stopped unpacking and went home pissed off. But for some reason, she leaves her dog there.
Yeah, I don't understand why, but she locks her golden retriever in this empty house and then goes back to her parents' house to stay.
Very odd. That night, David told his family about the old man in the room, how the ghostly apparition had thrown him on the waterbed, then told him to beware.
And you know that was fun. Telling a ghost story to your family at night before bedtime. And this is what we do at my house. It's a way of life.
Same.
And Debbie's 18-year-old boyfriend Arnie jumped in, saying he'd been in the waterbed room too, and the door had slammed shut on him, and then it wouldn't open. Ooh. But he obviously did get out, though.
Not to be outdone in the ghost storytelling, David then says he is in contact with the waterbed ghost right now, can see through its eyes as it relaxes on the sweet, sweet waterbed, luxuriating on the undulating waves. And now the old man ghost is with the dog, and the dog is going crazy, barking at it, jumping.
And this freaks the whole family the fuck out. He won the contest. He instinctively learned the first rule of horror movies. The dog is gonna get it. Spoiler alert, don't worry, the dog was fine. Though it did scratch the shit out of the door trying to get out. Spooky? No. No, if you lock a dog in a strange house all alone, it will scratch the door. Old man ghost or no old man ghost.
Yeah, man, poor dog.
Yeah, right.
Well, Debbie decides she's not moving into that house. It's obviously haunted as hell. Nope, she's not going to do it. Mary is obviously pissed off. Her friend told her she'd move into this house, was going to pay half the rent and the power, and now she's backing out because it's haunted.
Yep. And Debbie tells Mary she shouldn't move in there either because the ghosts will get her.
But Mary already paid the security deposit and the first month's rent, moved out of her old house, and she's got no choice but to move in and try to make it work somehow. When Mary asks Debbie where she's going to live, Debbie tells her she's moving in with her parents and bringing Mary's son Arnie with her.
So, just to go through it one more time, at the Gratzel house now you have Carl Sr., who is working 2 jobs to pay for everything and only comes home to sleep. Judy, the homemaker, Carl Jr., the rugged snowmobiler, Alan, the nerdy one, and little David, who we could call the weird one if we wanted. From home movies and photographs, it seems like he's always running around just in his tighty whitey underwear. Put some pants on that kid. Come on. And and now Debbie's moved in with her 7-year-old son Jason and her 18-year-old boyfriend Arnie. And it's a shit ton of people in that house. And it's about to get weird as hell.
David decides to up the ante on his ghost story. Guess what? That old man ghost? It's not a ghost. It's the devil, and he's coming. It's like a fun game he's playing.
It really is. So we're using a lot of resources for this one, as always. And as always, they're all listed in the show notes. But one of the main ones we're using for this section is The Devil in Connecticut, which was written by Gerld Brittle, who was apparently paid by the Warrens to write the book. It's actually a lot of fun and written a lot better than House of Darkness, House of Light, which the first Conjuring movie was based on, and I read for our Bathsheba episode. In this one, the prose is very simple. It's got a quick pace, it's easy to read, and it is super spooky. And obviously, it's a ton of utter horseshit. The Warrens paid this guy to write it and basically told him what they wanted the story to be. But in the end, I enjoyed it. Anyway, we're going to quote the book here for you, slightly edited for clarity. Okay, ready? I'm David. You're his mother, Judy. It's going to invade the house and bring hell down on this family. Oh, yes. And it will rain as we leave the picnic tomorrow. He's coming, Mommy. He's coming to get me.
Who, David? Who? Who is coming to get you?
The beast is coming down Route 25. It's floating in fast above the treetops. It just went past the Brookfield Police Department. He's coming to take me. You gotta stop him.
What? What do I do?
Oh no. He's above Silvermine Road. Stop him, Mommy.
My God, what'll I do? Holy water. I've got holy water. I'll get holy water against it.
He's coming. It's here. It's here. It's on the back porch. It's at the back door. 3 ominous knocks suddenly sounded. Judy threw a spray of holy water on the back door, declaring,
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, leave us in peace.
It worked, Mommy. He hates it. He's moved into the backyard. Oh no! Now he's coming around the front. He's going to try to get in the front door.
In the name of Jesus Christ, go back to where you came from.
Oh, that stopped him again.
Is it gone?
No. He's moving around the house, looking for another place to get in.
The entity then attempted entry through every door, window, and access point, including the cellar and fireplace. Frantically, Judy threw holy water where and whenever David told her to.
That's fucking crazy. I love this shit. And you know, it was filled with copious amounts of italics and capitals, and of course, lots of exclamation points. So first off, how much holy water does this lady got? Like buckets laying around? And second, isn't it sacrilegious and disrespectful to be throwing that stuff around like this? I mean, I don't know. But also remember, they're doing all this in a room packed with people. It's a show. There was no internet, no cell phones, TV sucked, and they were bored. This had to be highly entertaining, and they had to know that. Just at what point did they convince themselves that it was all real?
Through it all, Carl Jr. thought it was ridiculous and spent all his time in the garage working on his bikes and snowmobiles. And all the antics stopped, and the house went quiet when Carl Sr. came home from work.
But the David and Devil show went on, growing exponentially, snowballing. He now described the old man as a children's version of the devil, complete with bright red skin, pointed ears, fangs, black horns, a goatee and mustache. I like that. Devil's always got to have a goatee, right?
Absolutely.
As well as a curved, pointed tail and goat's legs with cloven feet. And he put on the fully possessed act now, growling and hissing, cursing, started saying all kinds of naughty, naughty things, like that Mary was the prettiest of them all, and the devil wanted to fuck her. It all sounds like it's coming from the mind of an 11-year-old to me. An 11-year-old that's definitely seen The Exorcist because he was doing an exorcist impression pitch perfect. I mean, listen to the growls on the tapes, and you could line them up right next to the Exorcist growls and be hard pressed to say which was which. Kid had it down pat.
They get on this holy roller kick, drag him to a Catholic church, make him go to mass, which he does, but acts like a little brat the whole time. Naughty devil. It's hard to discern the truth. There's so much that's in the book, but not mentioned anywhere else. Like a levitating leather belt, a rocking chair that rocked on its own, which is, of course, awesome, but a total trope at this point. And all this church stuff. But Carl Jr. clearly states that no one went to church before this all started. And even the book mentions Carl Sr. had not ever been baptized.
David adds more and more to the act every day. Now there's more demons. And this is how they're described in the book, The Devil in Connecticut. This is awesome. Get ready. Quote,
The new entities were tall and thin, with wiry arms that ended in stubby claw-like fingers. Their skin was red. Both stood on cloven feet. Like the beast, they had horns protruding from their heads. Though their appearance was half man and half animal, the entities were not identical. What immediately distinguished the two were the wounds. One had a bullet hole in the center of its forehead, and its face was covered with blood. The other had a knife stuck in its chest directly where the heart should be. They looked crazed and wild. Their eyes moved independently of each other, sometimes crossing, sometimes directing a hypnotizing gaze. As they looked at the boy dispassionately, they spoke about one thing only: his soul.
good stuff, huh?
Absolutely. That was great.
Yeah.
Well written.
It's a well written book. I mean, it's very simple. But that's what you want. I mean, it conveys the
Right.
story. The characters are portrayed cool. It's a little horseshit.
Right. That's great. I love it.
But it being a haunted house in New England in 1980, of course, soon famous Ghostbusters and demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved. How they got mixed up in this is up for debate. The book says a friend from work told Debbie about them. In the Netflix documentary, it says a neighbor who was into tarot cards called them about the Warrens. Funny because the Warrens notoriously hated tarot cards. Who knows? The book also says Judy brought priests to the house and that they, too, instructed her to contact the Warrens. Like, really? Do you think a priest would really tell them to call these hucksters?
I don't. I mean, unless they're in on it.
Yeah. Yeah. If they're in cahoots and splitting the profits. And Carl Jr. states there were no priests before the Warrens showed up. And I don't know, I tend to believe Carl Jr. over a writer that the Warrens paid.
Yeah, just ditto on that. And interestingly, the book also says that in August of 1979, a task force of New York and Connecticut State Police called the Warrens to help them with nefarious activity in the town of Ridgefield on the New York state border. It appears a rock band was living there, and there were, quote, profane chants, gunshots, and bizarre music coming from the property, end quote.
It sounds like my farm and half the farms in Humboldt County.
The wildest part is the Warrens had been called in because the police had been attacked by a mob wearing black hoods and capes and were apparently unable to defend themselves because of the group's supernatural powers and needed the Warrens' assistance.
Wow. They are literal superheroes. Who do you call when the police can't help? Ed and Lorraine Warren.
We got like the Ghostbusters theme song in my head now. Who
I'm
you
gonna have
gonna
them in
call?
superhero outfits on the
Yes, amazing. The section ends like this. Quote, locals scoffed at the Warrens' findings until months later, when the same entertainer introduced a new form of music, Satan rock.
ah, Satan Rock. Who are they talking about? Does anyone out there know? Email us at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail, please. I've heard of punk rock, ghoul rock, rockabilly, hellbilly, black metal, death metal, speed metal, thrash, grindcore, hardcore, hair metal, but I have never heard of Satan rock. But I want to. I mean, it would seem like Black Sabbath had already invented it in England nearly a decade earlier. But, bring on the Satan rock. Any Satan rock musicians out there want us to play your song during our closing? Send us something. If you make Satan rock, send us an MP3 to murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com and we'll play it and give you a shout out.
Oh, I love it. Well, the Warrens show up. When Ed and Lorraine pull up to the house and get out, the first person they encounter is Carl Jr. working on a truck. Ed asks him, what's going on in this house? And Carl Jr. answered,
Ah, my family's nuts.
Ed Warren then went to Judy, looked her stone cold dead in the eye, and told her that this was the second incident to occur in Brookfield that month. Half a dozen people had reported picking up a good-looking hitchhiker who would preach the Bible and then suddenly disappear, just vanish into thin air. His seatbelt still snapped closed.
Awesome. The seatbelt still closed is like the cherry on top. Perfection. How could you take someone seriously after they said something like that to you? It's almost like he's testing to see how gullible that they are.
He probably is. Hit it right, hit the nail on the head there. So the Warrens interviewed Debbie and Judy, who were all about it, asking them questions right in front of David. And Carl Jr. says they were putting the ideas of what to do right in his head. Ed and Lorraine loudly detailing the signs of possession. And that the next day, David did and said all those things exactly as they had described them, word for word.
And then the Warrens were soon back with cameras and tape recorders, ready to record the action. Carl Jr. says it turned into a show, an act. Here come the Warrens. It's time for the David is possessed by the devil show. And honestly, the tapes are kind of funny. I mean, you can hear him start laughing when he calls his mother a douchebag. He's like, you're a douchebag. Ha ha ha. It's this very sweet, childish laughter. It's like there's a moment when he cannot hide that he's actually enjoying himself and just having a blast. And remember, he'd been the baby of the family, but now his 7-year-old nephew, who never gets mentioned, was in the house. So kid's probably craving some attention.
Agreed. They'd hold him down as he grunted, telling his mother she was a douchebag and laughing. He'd howl and scream, thrash and kick. It was a big old spectacle. The whole family circled around as Ed helped hold the struggling kid down, and Lorraine went into a trance and talked to the spirits. What a show!
And one night, Carl Sr., who is a formidable bear of a man, walked in on the madness. As we've mentioned, he's working 2 jobs to pay for this huge horde of people. So he was working during the David and Devil show most nights, but he came home that night in time to see all this lunacy. He marched right up to David, grabbed him, smacked him, and told him, enough! Sit your ass down and shut up.
And the devil? Well, the devil did as he was told, sheepishly sitting down and behaving. All the grunting and screaming stopped, the cursing and the potty mouth. The devil just shut the hell up and was a good little boy. The devil isn't afraid of priests or the Warrens, but he sure listens to an angry Papa Bear.
In the book, it says the Warrens have documented film footage of David's head swelling up to the size of a basketball, but I can't find this footage anywhere. Has anybody seen it? Send it to us. It's not on the Netflix documentary. just him jumping around in his tighty whities and being pinned to the ground by his family like a big game of evil Twister.
Debbie and Judy are getting upset. They can't get an exorcism. There's so much paperwork. But the Warrens are busy behind the scenes. They contact a bishop who says he will send help.
And a cardinal comes, racing up in a red Porsche, his crimson robes blowing in the breeze. And that's something. I thought these guys took a vow of poverty. This cardinal, draped in red, checks out the scene, and he's convinced. Oh, hell yeah. This was the devil, all right. Sure as shit, that's the big guy Satan in that little boy. And it was gonna be a rumble because he was going to okay the exorcism. It's on.
Chapter 3: The Exorcism. There are certain criteria needed for the Catholic Church to perform an exorcism. They are divulging hidden or future knowledge.
David had said it was going to rain the next day, and it had. Definitely possessed.
Speaking in unorthodox tongues or in languages previously unknown.
If grunting and screaming counts, definitely. And calling your mother a douchebag? Where would he get such foul language? How could an 11-year-old boy possibly know the word douchebag? Plus, Ed played the tapes of David growling backwards, and in that, the kid was talking in French. So, check and mate.
Preternatural powers or action distinctly beyond the bounds of human ability.
If the Warrens show up, chairs are flying and people are levitating. You can count on it. But you can also count on the cameras not working that exact moment.
Identifying itself by name or other indisputable signs of a diabolical presence.
It's the big guy, the devil himself. He said so.
The exorcism was scheduled for September 2nd at the chapel of St. Joseph's School.
Yes, it's a school. They're going to exorcise demons in the chapel of a Catholic high school. Crazy, man. Crazy.
A priest named Father Verglac was chosen to perform the exorcism, assisted by 3 other priests. According to the book, in order to get David to the church, they had to tackle him as he brandished a knife at them and tie him to a chair. They don't mention that in the documentary at all, or anywhere else for that matter.
And all the true believers were there to show their support. Judy and Debbie and her boyfriend Arnie. They also dragged nerdy Allan along with them, who was really into it. But Carl Jr., he thought they were nuts and did not attend. And of course, Ed and Lorraine were there in a, quote, professional capacity. Lorraine to discern the presence of entities, and Ed to lend expertise and protect the priests. Yes, Ed is there to protect the priest. Dun, dun, dun! Ed to the rescue.
Here is an actual quote from Ed Warren about his role in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, we're like supernatural police department. We have to bring the culprits to church. We have to bring the culprits to the exorcist. This is why I say, when the demonic and evil spirits fight dirty, you have to do the very same thing.
How do you think he was fighting dirty with the evil spirits? Any ideas?
I really don't know. What do you think? Doesn't fighting dirty make you lose your immunity? Like, remember the priest in Salem's Lot when he lied to the master and the cross no longer contained any power? Wouldn't that happen if you fought dirty with a demon? What the fuck am I even talking about? I don't know.
Yeah, you can't apply like logic to this shit. Well, they were all anointed with oils, and as prayers were read, David began to growl and curse.
Douchebag. Shithead.
Strengthened by the intercession of the Immaculate Virgin, Mother of God, of the Blessed Michael, the Archangel of the Blessed Apostles, and all the saints, we undertake to repulse the attacks and deceits of the devil.
Fat dick pork chop. This is actually what he called the priest. Fat dick pork chop. No way that is an 11-year-old saying these things. It has to be the devil.
Behold the cross of the Lord, the bands of enemies. We drive you from us, unclean spirits, all satanic powers, all infernal invader, all wicked legions, assemblies, and sects. And in the name and by the virtue of our Lord Jesus Christ, depart from this Lamb of God.
Jesus is going to die in hell. Does that make any sense? Especially coming from the devil. Isn't Jesus already dead? And doesn't he free people from hell and also put them there? I'm just so confused.
Begone, Satan! Cease your audacity! Cease your malice! Cease your insolence! I command you in the name of the God Almighty, by the precious blood of our Lord!
Hymn books rustled. A door opened and slammed shut. It was a sign. Lorraine Warren stepped forward, shouting into the chaos.
All the lesser spirits are gone. They're expelled. 4 spirits remain in the child now. These are the strongest. Gluttony is present. Lust is present. A high entity using the name Gay-Toise. But deep off in the distance is the final one. That one, Father, is the devil.
His soul is mine. His soul is mine. Spare a dime for an old altar boy, Father.
And then David broke free of his binds, leapt up at the priest, eyes wild, fingers curled into claws, Ed leaping in to intercede, throwing the devil to the floor. As everyone in the room struggled to pin David down as he thrashed, snapping his teeth at them, his body began to bloat and move in inhuman ways. His tongue swelled, swollen and purple, and he began to choke, struggling to breathe.
The devil was killing him.
David's face went pale, his lips turned blue as he gagged on his swollen tongue, and that's when Debbie's teenage lover, Arnie, knew he had to step up to the plate. He had to save his girlfriend's brother.
Arnie grabbed a blessed crucifix, pressing it into David's forehead where it sizzled and burned, and then heroically, and exactly like Father Damien in the movie The Exorcist, he shouted at the devil, "No! Leave him alone! Take me instead!" Then Arnie felt a coldness sweep over his body.
Lorraine Warren screamed, "No! What have you done?"
But it was over. David was free of the demons. Arnie apparently had them in him now. But no one seemed too worried about that. He'd deal with that later.
Wild, okay. And of course, there's huge discrepancies between the book, The Devil in Connecticut, and the Netflix documentary, The Devil on Trial. Too many to even get into. The book going on and on about a demonic entity who turned the priest's pillows into sacks of blood, and not 1, not 2, but 3 more exorcisms needing to be held, each getting wilder and wilder. And other fun stuff that seems completely fabricated, including a birthday cake that levitated across the room and crashed into an oven.
But apparently Lorraine did go to the police and told them that Arnie was now possessed by the devil and to keep an eye on him. She also had a vision of death with a knife.
And yes, Detective Glenn Cooper confirms all of this. Lorraine did go to him, and she did tell him of a premonition of violence with a knife.
And it's spooky as hell. Was she psychically in tune? Could she converse with the spirits and see the future? Were the events to unfold truly diabolical and of a demonic order? Or does a blind hog run into an acorn every once in a while? I don't know. I don't not believe in these things. I just know the Warrens were manipulative liars. And that's basically an indisputable fact. But it is crazy. Coincidence or not?
But But another police officer that was there, an officer Lucas, says it was very clear to him that they were in the entertainment business and trying to drum up a story, and he was highly skeptical of them.
But life went on, and peace seemed to settle on the household.
Eventually, Arnie and Debbie found a little apartment rented to them by Debbie's boss, Allan Bono. The apartment was one of 4 rental units attached to the kennel and dog grooming shop where Debbie worked, all managed by Allan Bono. But Allan was more than just Debbie's boss. The two had been in a relationship before Debbie had seduced the teenage child of the woman she was living with.
Allan was not only Debbie's former lover, he was also said to be an alcoholic, getting deep into the white wine by 11 in the morning every day. He also apparently hated the kennels and working with dogs, and the kennel was supposedly a wreck. Debbie saying it was filthy, the cages never cleaned, and the dogs were often without food or water, and that some of them even died. And that right there is one of the most fucked up parts of the whole damn story. The poor dogs.
And 5 months later, on February 16th, 1981, the devil would rise up from his fiery pit and strike.
Chapter 4. The Murder. Arnie woke up not feeling well in the morning of February 16th, so he called in sick to work. But that didn't stop him from going to lunch with Debbie and her boss, Allan. And during lunch, copious amounts of alcohol were drank by everyone. But Allan in particular was getting pretty hammered, so much so that others became concerned as he was getting unruly and boisterous.
The party kept going, moving now into Allan's apartment where more drinks were consumed, and Allan supposedly became even more antagonizing, and at this point was so wasted he could barely walk.
It's hard to say exactly what happened. I mean, I read an article in an old newspaper that says they were arguing over a stereo system that Arnie had installed for Allan, but I don't know. It kind of seems obvious to me that Allan was probably making some moves on Debbie. He probably said something. I mean, they had been lovers after all, and he's wasted. Witnesses claim that as Arnie and Debbie attempted to leave, Allan started yelling, "Get back here. You ain't going nowhere. Nobody's leaving," and attempted to stop them, grabbing one of Allan's sisters, at which point a scuffle ensued.
Arnie and Allan began brawling right there in a patch of lawn in front of the kennels, basically on the side of a small rural highway. Debbie was jumping between them, trying to break it up. Then Arnie pulled a knife from a sheath on his belt and stabbed Allan Bono in the chest 4 times, sinking the blade in deeply, obviously using great force, as one of the thrusts broke right through the rib cage and pierced Allan Bono's heart. Allan crumpled to the ground, and Arnie bolted into the surrounding forest as Debbie stood there screaming.
Debbie then ran to the phone, hysterical, and called her mother, who alerted Carl Sr. and Carl Jr., who were in the garage working on their snowmobiles, that there was trouble at the kennels.
The father and son team leapt into a pickup truck and raced to the scene.
Now, here's something that really pisses me off. In the book, The Devil in Connecticut, it says the first people, who are conveniently unidentified, to arrive on the scene only saw 2 stab wounds, and that mysteriously 2 more stab wounds later appeared, as if the devil or some demon had come and stabbed him 2 more times. This is utter bullshit. The first people there were Carl Sr. and Carl Jr. Carl Jr. ran to help Allan, rolled him over and tried to stop the bleeding, telling him to hold on, to stay with him, that an ambulance was on the way. But Allan died right in front of him as he tried to save him. And he says he clearly saw 4 knife wounds in his chest. Not only did the Warrens make up this bunch of supernatural bullshit, they neglected to even mention that it was Carl Jr. who suffered this awful traumatic incident that would haunt him for the rest of his life.
Back at the Gratzel household, little David, hearing that Arnie had stabbed someone and was on the loose, says he could see him approaching in his mind and knew right then that he was possessed by the devil. And he was coming to kill David too. It's always all about David in the David Devil show, remember?
Convinced that Arnie was coming to kill him, David and Allan bolted the locks on the door and began to barricade themselves in the house. Now, if Carl Sr. had been there instead of trying to save a man's life, I bet there wouldn't have been any furniture being moved. I can tell you that.
But not to worry, because before the crazed demons could get to him, the ambulance driver, returning from the hospital, spotted Arnie trying to climb an embankment, and the police soon arrested him, drunk as hell, saying, "I didn't mean to hurt anyone."
And there's a demon. It's alcohol. That shit will make you do crazy stuff. Do you know 40% of murder convictions are alcohol related?
That's crazy, but also not that surprising.
Right? Be careful out there.
Criminal defense attorney Martin Manella believed it was the devil who did it and was more than willing and ready to defend Arnie. He believed it all. He visited Ed and Lorraine. They gave him the tour of their house, leading him to the basement where all the ghastly, ghoulish, and demonic collectibles were displayed in their little museum.
Man, I would love to see that. They even showed him Annabelle locked up behind glass, warning him to not even touch the case.
Although no one had ever pled innocent by reason of demonic possession in a United States court before, the tactic had been used in England. There, 3 cases had used it as a defense, 2 for arson, 1 for rape, and in all 3 cases, the defendants had been found not guilty by reason of demonic possession.
A rapist found not guilty because he was possessed by the devil. Fucking hell, man. Well, the looming trial made headlines everywhere, with Ed and Lorraine front and center saying, "Free this innocent man. It wasn't him. 'Twas the devil that stabbed Arnie's landlord to death."
Chapter 5. The Trial. On October 28th, 1981, 3 days before Halloween, the trial with the first innocent by reason of demonic possession defense case in American history got underway.
Carl Jr., who had been the one to rush to the aid of Allan and try to help him, was purposely kept out of the trial by the defense. In fact, when the trial started, Judy gave Carl Jr. money and told him to skip school and go have fun for the day. So there was no way he could be found and brought to trial, because they knew he would say it was all fabricated.
Arnie was facing a life sentence, and it was packed in the courtroom, standing room only, 6 Catholic priests sitting front and center in the visitors section, Ed and Lorraine holding court with the press outside.
But on the very first day, the judge ruled that demonic possession is not a legitimate defense, saying it was irrelevant to the case. It is not a science, and he will admit no evidence on demonic possession or devils. The 6 Catholic priests all rose at the same exact time and marched out of the courtroom, and the Catholic Church never made a statement about or mentioned the case again. Now, here's a weird thing. Judy said that afterwards, the local priests would have nothing to do with her or her family. So she would go to Mass and save the communion wafer to bring home to David. What the hell is up with that? I mean, it's not only dishonest and sneaky, but aren't you supposed to have gone to confession before you eat those? Aren't you supposed to be like in a state of grace, right? This one really flummoxedly. I mean, she's really performing a black mass. Talk about weird sorcery.
But back in the courtroom, Arnie's lawyer didn't bat an eye at the judge denying his plea of innocence by reason of demonic possession. He'd probably seen this coming a mile away and quickly pivoted to self-defense, hoping to land a manslaughter charge. And it worked. Arnie was found guilty of manslaughter and not murder.
But the judge sentenced him to the maximum limit, 20 years.
Meanwhile, the Warrens were busy working their exploitation magic and had Judy Grotzel flown to Hollywood, picked up in a limousine, and wined and dined in Los Angeles, having dinner with Dick Clark, Ed and Lorraine promising her she'd soon be a millionaire the whole time.
The Warrens brought in Gerld Brittle, who'd written their previous book, The Demonologist, which actually scared the shit out of me as a little kid. Apparently the Warrens, who were represented by the William Morris Agency, by the way, paid Brittle to write the story. So, his perspective is going to be skewed. And Carl Jr. says that during the interviews the family did with Gerald Brittle, the Warrens would be there, egging everyone on, going,
Make it scarier. Make it scary. Our readers want scary.
yeah, right? Readers do want scary. But once the book was written, the Warrens presented the family with papers to sign. And when Judy said, well, shouldn't we get a lawyer? Lorraine said to her,
Oh, no, dear. The William Morris Agency has a whole floor of lawyers for us.
which they did. But the lawyers were for the Warrens, not for the Gratzels. The book was printed in 1983. And the same year, NBC made a TV movie out of it that I'd love to see called The Demon Murder Case, starring none other than a very young Kevin Bacon as Arnie. But for some reason, they changed the location to, guess where? Newport, Rhode Island. Maybe that sounds spooky or something. It's spooky out there, huh?
Interesting. I was just there last week. Didn't see
Nice.
any ghosts, though.
The devil?
I did
Waterbeds?
not see the devil. No, went to the Newport Mansions.
Go to the waterbed store.
Go to the waterbed store. I'll make a note of that for the next time we go. When it was all said and done, the Gratzels family would receive a total of $4,500 for the book deal. Ed and Lorraine received an $81,000 advance on the book plus royalties.
Which are still rolling in. I mean, hell, I just bought a copy.
Not to mention the film rights, which are still paying off, for this story was the basis of the third Conjuring film.
In the end, the Gratzels felt they'd been hoodwinked and that the Warrens were con men. And it's funny the way everyone seems to feel that way after dealing with them.
The shoe fits. In 1985, Arnie married Debbie in prison, and a year later he was released, only serving 5 of his 20 years. He and Debbie had 2 children and remained happily married up until her death in 2021.
One thing to remember, Arnie never did get an exorcism.
I was just going to comment that. So, good point.
Maybe the demon and Debbie just got along good. It was like, that was who was really married,
Best way to be married to the actual devil. Carl Jr. to this day refutes everything and says the Warrens created the entire incident, then ripped the family off by exploiting the murder of an innocent man.
And here's a theory. If Arnie really thought he was possessed by a demon, like psychologically, the idea took over a type of clinical lycanthropy, which we've discussed on this show, and then he committed the murder, since it was Ed and Lorraine who put the whole idea into his head and convinced them of it, would they be somewhat culpable for the murder? I mean, it's something to think about. They manifested these events. They're chaos magicians, bending and distorting reality to make an illusion they can live in and convince others is real. And in the end, believing something is real is just what reality is for that person.
Boom, Matthew with the bombshell of should Ed and Lorraine Warren be posthumously investigated for murder? Is Lorraine has passed as well, right?
They're both dead, yeah.
Yeah. Man, I mean, kind of valid. Yeah.
And last but not least, there's indications that Judy may have been slipping a sleep aid called Sominex into their food. And that's what caused David to hallucinate. I mean, I honestly don't doubt that she would have done that. Get those goddamn kids to bed. I mean, this place is crazy. But even if she was, Sominex is just diphenhydramine. It's the same exact thing as Benadryl. Benadryl doesn't cause one to hallucinate demons. It just makes you groggy. I mean, if she was in fact doing that, would it have antagonized the situation? Everyone being a little tired and maybe grumpy? Sure. But another thing to think of, if she was capable of that, who knows what that lady was up to?
Yeah, good point. And if she had any, Judith has taken those secrets to the grave because she died on August 4th, 2011.
And that, dear listeners, is the story of the murder of Allan Bono and the trial of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson.
It's a good story. It's you haven't seen the third Conjuring movie yet, right?
All right, I started watching it last night, and I got like, I don't know how far into it. It was so fucking ridiculous. I mean, it's cool.
It's not unlike, I mean, it's not like, you said like the documentary and the book are wildly different. And then of course the movie is so heavily Hollywoodized that it's also extremely different from what we've touched on here. And unfortunately, it's just kind of like a bad movie. It's like not like I thought the first two Conjuring movies are pretty entertaining. I mean, the first one even has some legitimate scary parts to it. I think we talked about that when we did the Bathsheba episode. The second one is like, solid and not like it's entertaining. Like I'm not gonna be mad that I watched it. It was like a fun way to spend an evening watching a horror movie. My husband and I went and saw the third one in the theater, and we were like bummed that we wasted a night out and like movie tickets on that. It's not very good.
I actually liked the beginning. What I saw of it, I kind of liked. I mean, it was.
Well, let's talk when you've seen the end.
To The Exorcist, like we're crazy.
Yeah.
Like, when that guy pulls up, I mean, it's the same exact fucking shot. Like, you know what I mean? Where the priest looks up at the house and as he walks up. But after just studying the case so hard and like, I mean, I was getting deep, reading all these old newspaper articles, getting into this family. It was like hard to watch. You're like, this is such utter bullshit. They don't look like them. It didn't act like them. It didn't happen like that. You know what I mean? It just.
Yeah, very, very.
Different. I didn't even want to include it in the sources because it's just so off. But the ending's bad. Well, I mean, I guess.
I mean, it's just, I don't know. I just thought it was like kind of subpar all around, but watch it and then we can talk about it. And we I'm sure we'll hear from listeners who know about the trial, have seen the Netflix documentary, and have also seen the movie, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, and to listeners, we want to hear from you. You got a case you think we should cover? Did we get something wrong? I just want to say hi. Hey, are you a Satan rocker? Send us a song at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail. That's murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.